Last year, Nike introduced their first ever fully 3D printed sneaker, the Air Max 1000. And just 1 year later, not only do we have a second version, but also a significant technological upgrade that gives us our first real glimpse at what the future of sneakers could eventually look like. So here we have the box looking somewhat familiar, but also a little bit different. This is a much more interesting box than the Air Max 1000s came in. As you can see, heavily inspired by original Air Max 95 boxes. You've got the gray, the black, the Air Max logo with the giant 95,000 text on the top. I cannot wait to get into these, so let me show you guys. Oh man, this is the Air Max 95,000. Now obviously you're not going to get too much extra in the box, no extra laces or anything like that, but you do get a special paper, exactly the same as what the Air Max 1000s came in. It just kind of shows little like design sketches and stuff like that, but yeah, you'll see from the top-down footage. But here we have them, fresh out of Complexcon, where they were actually officially announced. They also kind of had a release. It was like a vending machine thing where people could actually win them, but don't worry, these will get an actual drop. And it also should be a little bit better than the last one. If you're familiar with the release of the Air Max 1000, extremely limited. It does seem like they're going to be making more pairs of this one. It's crazy. There was a lot of people who were pretty pissed off at how limited the Air Max 1000 release was. And I mean, that's definitely coming from Nike, because no other Zellerfeld shoe has released in these kind of crazy quantities where it was so limited. Nike and their hype train. So official drop date is November the 28th, and the retail price is, we're not entirely sure. I've heard $250 speculated. That would be a pretty significant price bump from the Air Max 1000. These were $180, so an extra $70 would be pretty wild. But again, not confirmed. I've just seen that on a few different sneaker pages. So these are going to have two different launches, one through Zellerfeld.com and the other one through the Nike Sneakers app. And that one will obviously be like a regular draw. I'm assuming it's going to be global, but we'll have to wait and see. And also, we should be expecting a bunch of other colorways on this specific model as well. They showcased a couple of those different colorways at Complexcon, which looked pretty cool. That's pretty much all of the release details, but of course you still need to know how comfortable these things are, how they fit, and what the hell is a 3D printed sneaker, and why should you care? So just like the Air Max 1000s, these are a futuristic take on already existing Nike model, the Air Max 95. These were obviously the Air Max 1. So we can kind of see a little bit of a pattern here with Nike and their 3D printed shoe line. They're just adding a couple zeros onto the end. I do kind of hope that in the future Nike does create some exclusively 3D printed designs that were only made for that. I feel like that could be really interesting. A design from scratch just exclusively and specifically for 3D printing. Either way, with the 95,000, there are some pretty massive changes to this sneaker and upgrades, and obviously you could tell it looks a little bit different from not just the original 3D printed Nike shoe, but every other 3D printed shoe available. This is the first time we've ever seen one of these with multiple materials and multiple colors. And what that material allows for is not just significant visual changes with now the dual colors, but it also adds additional performance and practicality to the sneaker as well, all without the need for any extra glue or extra parts. And that's actually really important if Nike wants to make 3D printed shoes a viable future for them. So Project Necter, what is it? Well, it's a material that's still 3D printed, so it is kind of integrated into the shoe. They don't glue this strip of material on or glue the bottom on at all. So it is 3D printed with the rest of the shoe. However, it is a different material. So on the upper, this is used for visual effect, where it kind of wraps around as this accent color around the entire shoe. You also get it on the Nike swoosh around the heel. However, underneath the shoe is where things get pretty interesting, because this material now is the entire traction pattern. And even though, yes, this does look super cool, so there's the whole visual aspect to it, but they did engineer this material specifically to give you extra grip. So when you feel it, it's a lot more tacky than the rest of it. It's a little bit more sticky. And at the Nike booth, where they were going over all of the different components that went into creating this, they had a little section for Project Necter, and they had a bunch of different designs that they were kind of trying to come up with for the traction pattern. They ended up with this design, which apparently gives the most amount of grip possible. It's a slightly firmer material and visually looks a little bit more glossy. So I just think it looks really cool, and also again just gives us a glimpse into the future for like what 3D printed shoes could look like with multiple different materials and colors. Now, aside from the whole Project Necter material, the amount of detail that they managed to print into the shoe itself on the base TPU is pretty insane. You've got the small ripples that surround the air units, the gradient effect that's worked into the design, obviously a nod to the original Air Max 95. Underneath, you have these printed ridges surrounding the Air Max logo, which is another insanely cool looking touch. It's little design details that are literally only possible because this pair of shoes is 3D printed, and Nike and Zellerfeld are clearly fully utilizing that with this. Now, in terms of how it compares to the Air Max 1000, there's actually some significant upgrades here as well. For starters, it's a decent amount lighter weight, which feels great. I mean, these weren't specifically like super heavy or anything, but they've made it lighter, which overall is going to help with the comfort and just how they feel on foot. Speaking of comfort, there's some significant upgrades in that department as well. For starters, they're a lot softer than the Air Max 1000s. A lot more of the upper has that printed mesh where it's super soft and again just kind of crumples as you walk, which is really helpful. It makes it feel almost like an actual padded mesh material, but obviously 3D printed. Around the ankle area, it's significantly more padded than the Air Max 1000 and also a lot softer, so you can just feel that when you put your foot inside. Now, typically with 3D printed shoes from Zellerfeld, there's almost like a gradient effect when it comes to the actual midsole. So it's super soft on the inside where your foot stands on, and it slowly gets a little bit more firm towards the outsole. Obviously, that's for durability, and it kind of replicates a traditional pair of shoes where you would have a soft insole for max cushion, and then some other material, whether it is a cushioned foam or a rubber outsole, and then right at the bottom, you would have your outsole. Now, this achieves that exact same feeling, just all with one single material. However, what's different about Nike's 3D printed shoes is the addition of the air units. So now, instead of just an air unit at the back like the Air Max 1000, you also have an additional one in the forefoot. Now, what's kind of funny is that with the Air Max 1000, the air unit was actually the hardest part of the shoe. The air unit is older technology for cushioning, so it's not going to be as soft as a 3D printed shoe, and you could kind of feel that in the heel. So obviously, I was super curious to see how the Air Max 95,000 with two air units now in there would feel. And to my surprise, comfort got a decent upgrade. One of the key components to that is the fact that they're using the big bubble variation of the Air Max 95, so it has a lot more space to compress, and I feel like it's a little bit softer than your Air Max 95 standard version as well. Like, they haven't pumped it up as much, which gives it that really, you know, soft feeling underfoot, especially combined with the softer 3D printed material. So yeah, overall, these are extremely comfortable despite having all of the air units in there as well. I think they learned from the Air Max 1000s and just made it a little bit softer. Now, as for sizing, one of the features that Zellerfeld offers with most of their 3D printed shoes is custom fit. So you scan your foot with your phone and then they custom print the pair of shoes for your exact feet. However, with these 3D printed Nike shoes, I don't believe they offer that because they're super limited, and especially through the Nike sneakers app, they don't have that feature. Maybe if you order through Zellerfeld's website, that's a possible thing. I'm not entirely sure. Either way, these are available with standard sizing, so I went with my true to size, which is a US 9. That's what I go with all of my Nike shoes, and these fit really good. It's a slightly more snug fit, obviously because you don't have laces, it needs to kind of stay on your foot. But because this material, especially on the upper, is so soft, it's a lot more forgiving. It doesn't feel like a traditional pair of shoes where it's really constricting your feet. So yeah, overall, I do recommend staying true to size if you are going to try and pick these things up in the future. Now, as for styling these things, well, I think if you're an Air Max fan, they definitely keep a lot of that DNA in there. It's just obviously more of a futuristic, clean version, which I do really like, especially with the contrasting colors. Easily one of my favorite looking Nike shoes on foot that I've seen all year. I'll show you what these things look like on foot with a couple different pant options and different materials and stuff like that, so you can kind of see what this 3D printed shoe will look like out in the wild. Which, speaking of, when I was at Complexcon, I saw quite a few people wearing these things. I don't know if they were part of the Nike team or something like that, but all of them looked really cool. No matter what their outfit looks like, you just look down at their feet, you really notice that vault color with with the black, and it's a really cool look. Either way, my final thoughts on the Air Max 95,000s is basically just excitement. To see how far Zellerfeld and Nike have pushed this technology even in just one single year, it just makes me think, like, in a couple years time, what are these going to look like and be capable of? Zellerfeld has been working on multicolor printers, which is a pretty big step. Once you can get, you know, a lot of these 3D printed shoes kind of look like one singular color and one singular material, but once you break through that, clearly on this pair of shoes, you can create some pretty insane stuff. But I'd love to know from you guys down in the comment section. Let me know, would you wear these things, the crazy Air Max 95,000? Like always, I'm gonna chuck another video up in the top left hand corner. Click on it to check it out.